Hi, I'm Will, and I'm going to be doing my presentation on Pedro Albizu Campos, who lived from 1891 to 1965. Alright, so a little bit of backstory on Campos during his college age. So he was Puerto Rican, and he became an attorney and politician. Um, he was also a figurehead for the Puerto Rican independence movement, that was against colonization, pretty much, or holding Puerto Rico as a colony for the United States. Um, Campos was deployed to Puerto Rico during the outbreak of World War One. He was a lieutenant and was honorably discharged from the army at the end of the war, so in 1919, with that rank of first lieutenant. But during his time in Puerto Rico, he's able to see the racism and the social dynamics between the U.S. military and the Puerto Rican citizens, and how badly the U.S. military actually treated those citizens. And that's one of the large things that actually shaped his perspective on U.S. and Puerto Rico relations. He was also a victim of racism during his time at Harvard. He had final exams, but they were delayed by one of his professors so that he would not graduate and to give a valedictorian speech, because the professor thought it'd be embarrassing to have a Puerto Rican giving that speech and being the valedictorian. So that also obviously had an effect on him and his opinion of Americans' treatment of Puerto Ricans. Another important thing to note, early in his career, he supported the Irish independence movement. And he did this through organization and councils. He also joined conferences and would debate in favor of Irish independence. In 1922, he consulted Irish officials about drafting the Constitution for the Irish Free State. That was kind of the beginning of his political career. Going back just a little bit, after he graduated from Harvard, he would return to Puerto Rico, Ponce, Puerto Rico. Given that he graduated with a degree in law, he would help many poor people, being a lawyer, obviously, and that helping the people of Puerto Rico kind of propelled him to a position as president of the Nationalist Party. So when he was selected in 1930, they kind of made an attempt to become a credible party in the country of Puerto Rico. However, all their they spread it. They went on the radio, but all of this was censored. So basically, their campaign was pretty ineffective. So when he continued as president throughout his entire life, and was a spokesperson for the Nationalist Party between those years. So he started in 1930, and then until he passed away in 1965. The main thing he stood for was a Puerto Rican struggle for freedom from American oppressors who had basically held Puerto Rico as a colony. And he would actually be one to point out that given that America was a leading nation in the world, and they stood against colonization, they should not hold Puerto Rico as a colony. Kind of pointed out one of the United States values and their hypocrisy in that value. So some particulars, in 1930s is when he really solidified himself as a man who worked for the people. Some specifics would be he helped set up farmer strikes. He wanted to lower the gasoline prices. He also wanted to mainly fight so that the people had enough food, as you see the flour protests, and halt the sugar industry, which was terrible treatment of workers. And he pretty much always achieved those demands with his great organizational skills. U.S. did not really care about him or notice his impact until 1934, which was when he led an entire island-wide agricultural strike against sugarcane, or for sugarcane workers, They raised the wages of those workers from 45 cents to $1.50 per day or per 12 hours, which is an incredible raise. So you can really see that he was able to achieve his demands with his organizational skills. Back to that. So after this, policemen and FBI started keeping a closer eye on him, basically trailing him wherever he went. When he'd go around and make speeches, they would always be behind him filming. That was very apparent and quite obvious, honestly. He'd watch his home, like intercept mail, interrogate neighbors. And they would also arrest members of the Nationalist Party that worked with him. All right, so the Rio Peridas massacre was when two nationalists assassinated a U.S. colonial. Campos was charged with seditious conspiracy because they figured that he organized it. He was imprisoned for 26 years, which is crazy. He was given 10, but kept in jail for 26. And that was for trying to overthrow the United States government. But then he was pardoned eventually. While he was in prison, he was a victim of human radiation experiments, which made his health decline quite quickly. A quick quote from him is, "The Americans knew what they were doing. They needed me off this island right away. 6 more months in 1936 and we'd have gotten our independence." So shows how confident he really was that Puerto Rico would gain their independence if they organized well and fought for what they really cared about. All right, so closing up to the end of his life, in 1950, he planned and called for armed uprisings in several cities on behalf of independence against the United States. He was convicted and imprisoned again after that. He was pardoned near the end of his life, but would die within the year that he was pardoned. So his lasting impact, I would say his huge ideas and spark for the idea of independence and organized struggle was his main impact that would last for many decades with the Puerto Rican people. However, some specifics would be he influenced some followers, which resulted in the formation of the pro-independence movement, which was in 1959, which transformed into the Puerto Rican Socialist Party about 12 years later. And then Juan Antonio Correte, I can't say that, but anyways, who worked closely with Campos while he was alive, organizing. He would go on and form the Puerto Rican Socialist League in 1962. So those are some specific, but his mainly his patriotic emotions about separating Puerto Rico and leaving as a colony of the United States that sparked in the hearts of so many Puerto Rican people was his main impact that lasted many decades. Here are my sources, and thank you all for watching.